silly question. When you were doing your world record trip with your buddies, did you guys have enough food that you never had to worry about food? Or did you guys ever had this moment where you sat next to each other and you were like, if we all are extremely hungry, who's going to eat who first?
Well, they would have definitely eaten me first because I was definitely the fattest. Yeah.
Wait, you were that guy? You were the guy who was going to go first?
I was the fat one, yeah. But no, we talked about it. I reckon my sort of my right butt cheek, that could have lasted a few days. It would have bought some
like
some
grab
time.
a fork?
Yeah, just you get your
Dig
leather
in.
man. The word bespoke is thrown around so much.
Yeah.
But most of the time it doesn't really do that. Whereas for us, I suppose we're not entirely travel. We're a mix between like production, events, conservation and travel.
Yeah.
And it's almost like haute couture. It's not bespoke. It's that very fine, the designer's coming down and creating that one-off piece just for you. So how we charge for it, how we structure it is different every single time. We have a guy who's all he does is insurance and permits and contracting. And we only do between 20 and 30 trips a year. So
oh, wow.
It's a very
product.
coutured product.
You guys are definitely the Birkin of travel.
Okay, I haven't had that before. I'll take that.
Very high end. Sounds amazing. Where are you guys going next?
So, I mean, right now we have people traveling in Kenya, in Norway, and Eastern Europe currently. I'm off to Scotland for the next trip that I'm looking after. And then, going forwards for me personally, I'm off to Canada, Indonesia, potentially Antarctica over Christmas. And again, typically...
Antarctica for Christmas?
Yeah. I've done 3 Antarctic Christmases now. You
love your cold places.
I love everything. There's not a preference in terms of climate or terrain. It's the wholeness of the experience that really excites me and draws me. And yes, I've done my fair share of the cold stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't mean I necessarily just gravitate towards the cold. I mean, I just come from Joshua Tree, and that's certainly wasn't cold.
That.
Yeah. It's what's there. It's what's to entertain. It's sating my curiosity, I suppose. And the more extreme places are, then the more unusual and less touched and undiscovered they are. So that has a draw as well.
And that's where you find crazy things that have not been found before.
The unusual certainly exists out there, yeah.
Like a Lenin statue.
Yeah, a Lenin statue. You have been doing your research. Yeah, I mean, you want to know a bit more about that?
Yeah, so actually, I'm going to give a little brief, short introduction of my amazing guest today, everybody, Henry Cookson.
My background, when I fell into this world by accident, was more extreme adventures. So the sort of stuff where, it's hardcore, there's a lot of endurance, remote places. So it could have been ice caps, going to, the North Pole, going up high altitude mountains or crossing deserts. And that started out in 2004. But then over the years, as developed sort of a wider client base and ideas sort of percolated more, we started opening up to sort of basically everywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere which was interesting and unusual, and even the less unusual, if you approach it from a directly different approach, then you can do something different, which sets it apart from how other people do it. So we don't follow the crowd. I've always slightly swam against the current of what people do, not because I'm a rebel or want to be difficult for the sake of it. Just there's been this curiosity to see things and do things that other people tend not to. And that marries quite well with our clients. Typically come from places where they've already traveled quite extensively, and it's like the what's next. So that's where we come in. It's like, okay, we sometimes reinvent the wheel, sometimes we're going to totally new undiscovered places, or doing something in a different approach that people haven't otherwise looked at before.
Yeah. And that's what makes a great adventure. Like you have to have that component in your personality to be like, I'm going to divert and go this other way because I want to see what's over there, and I'm going to explore, and then I'm going to make a amazing career out of it and take other people with me, right?
Spot on, yeah. I mean, life is it's very easy to get into a routine. And I think a lot of people are fearful and they get caught up in a career, they get caught up in a relationship, and before they know it, they've got kids, they've got the house, they've got the picket fence, and then suddenly their life has gone by.
It's the safety that offers,
it's the safety, and we try and encourage people to go out and do something a little bit different. And it isn't dangerous, it isn't difficult to do. It's just having that psychological leap, I suppose, to get out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And people are constantly saying, wow, you're so lucky, you're so blessed with what you do with your life, but I only made a couple of decisions. Okay, it wasn't all planned, it certainly wasn't planned, but I knew I didn't like working in banking. I used to work at Goldman Sachs. I
right,
really
you used to be an
that.
investment banker.
Yeah.
What a change.
Completely. But at the time, as a young man, a lot of people are, they're sort of pressurized to decide what to do with their life. And quite a young, in my mid-teens, it was like, you need to pick a career path. And a lot of people are still finding ourselves trying to work out what they want to do, what they are, who they are. And in my early 20s, post-university, I still was completely clueless into which direction to go.
Yeah.
I was envious of friends who knew they wanted to be a medic. They had their life planned out.
Yeah.
But actually, in hindsight, thank God, I was never going to be that disciplined and sort of, structured. And so the banking was a sort of bit of a panic. It was like, well, I don't know what to do. I need to, earn a bit of money and be sensible. I certainly mucked around a bit. I liked I like to play. And that was a sort of a good sort of, it was a good sort of balancer for me. It certainly sort of put me in one place for a bit, and it made me realize very much what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I didn't want the corporate life. I didn't want that routine, and I certainly didn't want 22 days a year holiday. I like flexibility. I'm a bit impulsive. If there's an opportunity, something cool to do, then I want to jump at it. So, I'm sort of notorious for not planning for myself, too far in the future. So see what the doors will open along the way.
I forgot to ask you do this, but there's this personality test I have all my guests take. It's a very psychology based, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times from your person, your characteristics, it tells you this is your personality type. And a personality type that is very congruent with what you're saying is there are adventurers, right? There's a very certain personality type that is just exactly what you're saying. Just hates routine, doesn't like to be told here are your tasks for the day and do this, and they just get bored so easily and so quickly, and they almost don't care what that offers to them, the safety that it offers to them. They're no, I want adventure and I want exploration. And I wonder, I totally forgot to how you take the test, but we can do it later whenever you're when you have time, and you can send me your results.
Okay. Because
I really wonder if you are that personality type that is just has a has an itch for adventure. And it's just it comes from within. You don't force it.
The itch is there, and I mean, when I tell my story, there was an itch. It all started from Africa when I was a teenager, and that itch was there, and I couldn't get rid of it. I didn't realize it was there at the time, but then finally it sort of grew to enough of a crescendo that I had to quit the banking.
Right, and that's where you got your. I hate reading. I'm such a bad reader, and I have bad eyes too. But from what I remember, you got your training in Asia and Africa, right, to become a guide?
So the training, I suppose life is training.
Right.
I spent my summers out in Greece, playing around in the Mediterranean. I went to East Africa, to Kenya when I was in my early teens, and when I left school, I went and worked on a horse riding safari. And I mean, that was just insane. We were chased by lions and charged by elephants. I was in charge of a team of 25 people putting up this mobile safari camp. So this is, changing car tires and driving through sort of, swamps and looking after slightly paranoid guests who were terrified of the bush. So, that's where the training, I suppose, started. And then I worked on a sheep station in the Australian outback, 36,000 head of sheep, and we spent 3 months there rounding up the sheep, bringing them in to shear and dip.
How old were you?
Then I was 21.
Oh.
So you pick up a lot of life skills. And then I did my stint in the banking. And then I fell into the whole polar expedition stuff. And then when it came, the realization came, this is what I need to do for the rest of my life. You know, be in the outdoors, explore the world. That's when I probably did the dedicated proper training. I went up to Alaska and spent like 3 months doing really intense guide training, which I probably should have done in hindsight before I started crossing ice caps and breaking world records. But, you know, you don't plan these things.
Right. And now that you mentioned it, you have a world record.
I do have a world record, yes. So it wasn't, again, intentional.
That wasn't intentional?
No, that was a sort of bonus. I think a lot of people who do polar expeditions, they're driven by the glory and the sort of, you know.
Right.
For us, I mean, I'd had a sort of an interesting, you know, sort of bit of a sort of complicated family sort of thing going on, and I just wanted to get away.
Right.
And I was with a great friend in Scotland. Actually, we were fishing. Good health, good wine, by the way. Nice choice. We were trying to catch some salmon on the Scottish coast in Scotland, and we drank a little bit too much whiskey. And you asked earlier about, you know, good choices over when you have a few drinks. I mean, you let me know whether this is a good choice or not. We pretty much finished the bottle of whiskey, and during that conversation, my friend Rupert, he mentioned that he'd heard about a ski race to the magnetic North Pole up in the Canadian Arctic, and you know, he said, why don't we go and do it? And you know, half a bottle of whiskey down, it seemed like a great idea.
Let's do it.
You know, the fact that we didn't know how to put up a tent, we didn't know how to cross-country ski, we'd never been anywhere colder than the ski resort in the Alps, you know, hadn't really dawned on us at the time. And you know, we entered this race. It was what, 360 miles across the Arctic Ocean, polar bears, -20, -30 degrees temperatures. I mean, you know, hardcore.
And that's on a warm day, no? Like -30?
Depends on up there at that time of year. That's sort of your average. The wind affects it as well. The wind blows. Thing is, people, it's not as cut and dry as people think. If the wind is, if it's -20 degrees and it's a sunny day and there's no wind, it's actually quite pleasant. If you've got the right clothing. But the moment that wind comes up, then things get a bit more problematic.
But it goes down to like -50.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I mean, we had days of definitely -60, 70 with the wind.
Jesus,
yeah, so you know, your skin is exposed; it freezes pretty quickly. So you know, it's not for idiots and fools. And we were certainly described as the idiots and fools. There were 17 teams, and our team, you know, we had the least experience. We mucked around. We didn't take it particularly seriously. You know, so we were written off before this thing even started. And, you know, long story short, we ended up winning this race. We beat the people who were meant to win it. There was this Arctic warfare instructors, you know, Marine commandos, people who've been up Everest, people who, you know, basically they lived in tents. And we were sort of, you know, I was an ex-banker. The other guy was a tech guy, and Rupert owned a pub.
Great.
So anyway, this was going to be a one-off, you know, something to tell the grandchildren about, and you know, we won it. That was slightly unexpected. It was abject misery.
I bet.
I mean, there was a sort of perversity in the fact that we, you know, people asked why we were successful. I think we just found it funny. The perversity of the fact we'd spent a significant amount of money to enter this race, and it was so horrific.
Yeah.
The worse it got, the funnier it became. I mean, it's like, you know, people spend money to enjoy themselves, and we were having an awful time. But
I love it. It's like such a first world thing to do, like these things. Like people pay so much money to do, like literally put themselves through suffering and hardship.
I think had we known how much suffering and hardship it was, I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
But then, you know, literally within weeks of finishing this thing, that's when we then focused on, you know, it's going to be a one-off. We started focusing on the Antarctic, which was, you know, the trip that produced the record.
Yes.
And this was a very different sort of undertaking. The Antarctic being, you know, south of the planet, it's a landmass. It's larger than Australia. And, you know, it's the hardest continent to get to. We know the least about it than anywhere else on the planet.
Right.
And that was a different story. You know, the Arctic ski race that we just won was 360 miles. This was 1,100 miles and considerably colder.
Insane.
And more remote and more altitude.
Insane.
And all sorts of things like that. So we focus on a point called the pole of inaccessibility, which is the exact center of the continent.
Yeah.
So every landmass will have one. There's one in the US, there's one, you know, in the UK. And this point had only ever been reached previously by a Soviet expedition back in the 1950s using these sort of track vehicles. But for us, the real kicker was that they'd left this statue of Lenin there.
Yeah.
So here we are, the most remote point of the planet. There's a statue of Lenin that could or could not be there. And no one had ever been there by foot. So
Right, yeah, so that's something I was reading, that you guys became the holder of the world record for reaching the exact center of the Antarctic without mechanical means.
Exactly.
So every person, every group, every team that's ever been there was with like tracked like vehicles and like, you know,
One guy even flew in. But I think the last person who
planes.
went there was, I think, in the early 60s. I think it was 62. So, you know, no one had visited this place in 40 years.
Yeah.
And so the consensus from all the scientists was like, Lenin, he's long gone. You know, with all the snow drifting and precipitation, you know, there's no way. You're going all this way to find nothing.
What whiskey were you guys drinking?
On that, it was famous grouse. Not even expensive one.
I'll do that to you.
Yeah, that trip that cost a pretty penny. Yeah, so a $14 bottle of wine of whiskey ended up being.
Sounds like a Jameson type of decision making.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, you know, that changed my life, and you know, we found Lenin. He was there. Took us 49 days to get there. We actually used kites. So you know when you see people kite surfing, using those types of kites, and you're on a pair of skis, and then you've got a sled behind you, and in the sled is all your supplies. And there was 4 of us on this team, and I mean the weight of the sled, I mean something in American money, it was 135 kilos. So we're looking at about 300 pounds, 320 pounds.
What?
Yeah.
How did you guys carry it?
So you have a harness, and the harness is attached to the kite, and then the sled is attached. So all the power is converted through that harness. But then you're still on a pair of skis, and you've got to use the skis to edge into the wind. And then on the ice is not flat; it's like very lumpy. It's like got ice waves that we call.
So you're carrying your skis. You're walking, and then sometimes you're using.
The skis are on your feet.
Oh, the whole time.
The whole time.
Oh.
Yeah. To walk on the snow is just like you sink into the snow. It's not energetically efficient.
So it's like fresh powder.
Mixes. Yeah. The Antarctic is technically a desert, so there's very, very low precipitation. But you're on an ice cap, and the ice is it's nearly 4,000 meters deep, which is about 2 miles. 2 miles of ice underneath you before the bedrock. It's an insane place. And all you see day in, day out is white and blue sky. But it has a beauty to it. You get colors in the ice, the skies are endless. And the atmosphere is so clear. When you start from the coast and head up onto the ice cap, you get these incredible mountains called nunataks, which are these granite spires sticking out of the ice. And they could be 60, 80 miles away, and you can still see them like they're next door to you because there's no dust. You know, up here we have pollution and dust, and it's just totally clear. And there's this eerie, beautiful silence about it.
The oxygen, what was the air like?
So, because of the altitude, and at the bottom of the planet,
not enough oxygen.
Not quite enough. No, because of the rotation of the planet, the centrifugal forces actually make the atmosphere 20% thinner down at the Antarctic.
Oh.
So not only at your altitude, but you've also got that.
That's dangerous.
It's not dangerous. You're out of breath. I mean, you go and walk, 20, 30 steps from your tent to go and take a bathroom break. It's you're out of breath.
What happens if so let's say your body acclimates to its environment, right?
Yeah.
So you guys had that, you didn't have any hardships? Because I heard you can start hallucinating if your body doesn't acclimate correctly,
Yeah, if you throw yourself into altitude very quickly, you can get into and I've done, a fair few high altitude mountains. And the reason it takes so long to take out these mountains is you need to acclimatize to the atmosphere and the altitude. But because we started at the coastline and we walked up onto the plateau, that was a 10-day process. So that was a nice sort of easing in to getting your body used to it. It generates more red blood cells, and you get more used to the cold. So within a few days you're sort of you're good to go, so to speak.
That's crazy.
But again, going sort of back to psychology, when I take people up mountains, for instance, the people who are least likely to get to the top are the really fit alpha males. Yeah, because they think they know it all. Men, by definition, don't listen as much. They don't, they think they know it all. They're fit. They're, beating their chest. They're the ones, altitude is the great lever of men. And I've seen it so many times, the
That's
sort of
hilarious.
the meek, slightly unfit, lady, and she just nails it to the top. And like, you know, the special forces dude, you know, he's been in combat, you know, he's the one who's been taken off on a stretcher.
That's funny. It reminds me my shooting instructor. So I like shoot guns as like a hobby, and like my instructor always like tells me and everybody that like people who come and like start learning from him, because I asked him, I was like, who does the best, who learns the fastest, and who does the worst? And he always goes, surprisingly, women do the best, and guys that are like young and fit, and they do the worst. And I'm like, how come you wouldn't think that, right? And he goes, just because of the ego. Like, they think they know how to do this from the movies they watch, from like watching John Wick like 5 times. They think like they just know how to do this, so they don't take instructions, they don't listen. However, women, they come in and they're just like tabula rasa. They're just like, you know, they listen fully. So and true. They take instructions like so well. And I was like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot of, you know, being a guide, it's, you know, you need to know your craft. You've got to know the dangers, how to stay safe. You've got to be able to navigate all those things. That's a given. But I think the difference between a good guide and a great guide is the psychology. It's understanding who you're taking and how to encourage, know when to push, when to hold back, you know, because people outside of their comfort zone, you know, they can be very fearful.
Yeah.
And even, you know, the more egotistical alpha type guys, you know, especially when you have a group of guys, they will all, you know, none of them wants to be the one who fails or holds the team back. So I give these pep talks, and I was like, look, this is not about individuals, it's a collective here. And if one person falls, we all fall. But also, you know, so on that front, people then are maybe a little bit even more hesitant to sort of put their hand up and see if they need help. So when you're asking how someone is, you can see how someone's struggling, or their body language is giving up. You don't go, how is everyone? And they'll go, okay. You ask everyone else from how they are 1 to 10. So then they can change that, rather than just like, smart. I'm not okay or I'm okay, and then they have a little bit more wriggle room to show that they're not doing as well as they'd like without sort of losing face.
I'm a -5, but I'm okay. I'm fine.
You'll be fine.
Don't worry about me.
Just a bottle of wine and we'll get you straight to the top of that mountain.
Do you guys drink?
On trips? Oh yeah, on the Antarctic trip, yeah. I mean,
you have to.
Well, I wouldn't say you have to. It's not in the book, but I strongly advise it. Because we're using kites, you're reliant on the wind, and quite a lot of the time the wind wasn't blowing. And so then you've got downtime in your tent. And, you know, the first days, it's quite nice. You have a break, you rest, recover, you can repair stuff, you can, you know, send messages home and stuff like that. But then after a few days, you know, it becomes quite monotonous. So, you know, a bit of whiskey and, you know, but weight is a big issue. You can't take loads of stuff, and liquid is by definition heavy. So we took 2 very nice bottles of whiskey, and then we took, I think, 1 liter of 90% grain spirit. So the whiskey,
winners get the nice whiskey.
Well, the whiskey was like, you know, that was your first thing. That tastes nice. It was good, and then you get a little bit bombed on the grain spirit. Afterwards.
You're like, when you don't care anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, just to get a bit of a buzz. But yeah, you got. I think, you know, and I sort of touched on it. Sense of humor.
Yeah.
You know, you take these things too seriously, then it sort of like defeats the object. And then having a bit of fun. And we didn't have this sort of militant sort of approach where we had to cut weight at any means. You know, we Paul, who is our Canadian guide, who's just he's like the Jedi master of polar travel. He's very unassuming. Not many people have heard of him, but he is the man. I mean, he is probably the most accomplished polar traveler in the last sort of 30 years. And he's just got this amazing sort of technique, and he calls it camping in style. So like, rather than like, you glamping, yeah. And rather than shaving every extra pound off our weight, so look, let's put another, you know, 30, 40 pounds on.
I like that.
But psychologically wise, we're so much happier because we've got better food, you've got more comfortable clothes, you may have a better camera that you want to play around with, and you're going to get some awesome images. So the mind is much stronger than the body. You know, and I'm a great believer. Everyone thinks, I've got to be a superhero, you know, marathon runner, extreme adventurer to be able to do these trips. If your mind is in the right place and you're able-bodied, I generally believe most people can do these endeavors. And I think people are put off and they're fearful of it more because the type of people who typically do these trips, you know, they're professional adventurers, they have to make a career on it. And so they're relying on sponsorship and advertising to be able to, you know, get their funding. Now, if you plan a trip from A to B, you plan it immaculately, meticulously, and you want everything to go according to plan and successfully. But a really successful trip is pretty boring. You go to A to B, there's no events, there's no incidents. So when it comes to writing their books and doing their interviews, I think then the hyperbole comes in. There's a little bit of artistic license to make it more exciting. And so therefore everyone thinks, oh my God, I'm going to die, my fingers are going to freeze off, I'm going to fall down a crevasse, and I'm going to get eaten by a polar bear. The reality is, me and Rupert and Rory, my two teammates, we're pretty, normal individuals. Okay, maybe we're a bit stubborn and a bit sort of, brain dead in some respects for throwing ourselves into this thing. But we weren't particularly fit. I hate exercise. I'm now a much healthier human being than I used to be, but I used to drink and eat badly, and I was definitely another 20, 30 pounds heavier than I am now. But it was the mindset that got us there. It was that ability to laugh at yourself, have fun, not take yourself too seriously, but got us there. And you get fit on these trips. It's a slow burn. So you gain your muscle mass and all that stuff as you go along. And a lot of polar expeditions will fail because people are so fit they've got no body mass. So you have a calorific deficit every day you're traveling.
Right.
So we're eating something like 7,000 calories of food a day. The average male is 2,500 calories in their, if they're living day-to-day existence in LA or whatever. You cannot physically, and then you're burning something like 10,000 calories a day because of the cold and the exertions you're doing. So there is a deficit. Yeah. So if you arrive as a lean, mean fighting machine, there's no fat to burn. And so your body's going to start changing muscle into energy, and then you wither away your muscles. So you need to have a bit of a belly. And so I took on, from the training, I took on the eating side very enthusiastically. In fact, so enthusiastically that I almost couldn't fit into my clothes. I mean, it was like...
Just start eating fast food like a couple of months.
It was, I didn't know, a nutritionist would be horrified. I mean, it was McDonald's and Domino's pizza and just like eating the leftovers of people's food if they hadn't eaten, it was quite disgusting, but pints of Guinness. But I put on a huge amount of weight. I mean, I was like, yeah, and it all went, but not probably the healthiest approach to doing it.
Have you guys ever had someone who just gave up in the middle of the way and was like, you know what, I want to go back, screw this was a mistake, I don't want to do this?
So the Arctic trip and the Antarctic trip I told you about, they were sort of private personal trips, and we were fortunately, no one gave up on that. Since I became a guide, and again, the more extreme trips are now sort of, a bit more of a rarity. We do a sort of different type of experience for people. It's soft adventure. But in terms of
what's a soft adventure? Because what you're describing right now is
this is all back in 2004 to 2007. And then I did a few mountain trips and a couple of Greenland ice caps and a North Pole trip. I sort of took Prince Harry to the North Pole back in 2011. We took a whole lot of wounded soldiers for charity and to sort of highlight what they were doing. But since then, the soft adventure. So we go down to the Antarctic now. We take a super yacht, and the super yacht has a helicopter on it and a submersible, and so you have this incredible bubble of comfort
to come down.
This is we'll go by sea. So the extreme expedition, you can fly in from Cape Town to the Antarctic and you can stay in an amazing camp. But to go and do that, it's like a 7-8 day trip. You fly in by a Gulf Stream, you land on an ice runway. That's going to cost you nearly $1 million for a group of 12 people for the week. So a very different type of adventure, and a lot more appealing to those who don't want to go through the training and the brutal conditions that are extreme expeditioning. So,
but they're very different things, though.
It's an extremely different thing,
And it's like different purposes,
So when you look at the website at Cookson Adventures now, we're more the soft adventures. It's staying in the lovely lodges and lovely camps, using boats, helicopters, all those sort of assets. And where I've got to be careful is the old days you used to have to walk to the mountain and then you probably carry your own food. Now we'll take the helicopter to the top of the mountain. There'll be a chef waiting for you.
I love it.
So it's but we'll do mini adventures. We'll do bits of ice climbing, maybe some sea kayaking. A skidoo across the ice cap. But there's always a nice touch. There's a warm, clean environment, and there's some amazing food and some drinks.
Can't believe you do that as a job. I'm so jealous.
It's
an amazing career to have.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's awesome. Like, you just do all the amazing things to the best of quality, and it's so cool.
Well, I've
I
got my
want-
bucket list. I'm a
Yeah.
curious person by heart, which, we'll see what your psychological analysis of me
Yes.
spits out. And I want to see the world. There's so much to do. I haven't ticked off a fraction of what's out there. And there's a little bit of an arms race because the world is changing dramatically. The environment is on. The world is changing dramatically. The environment is on the retreat.
Right.
Species are collapsing, and there are things that probably aren't going to be around that much longer. And then also cultures are changing. Globalization. This is making everything very homogenous. There are places that I've been where there's an authenticity, there's a curiosity about who you are. But now that you have the iPhone and cell phone reception everywhere, that curiosity now is sort of gone in a way.
Yeah.
You arrive somewhere, they know exactly who you are, and you're a little, not everywhere.
Yeah.
But some people may think I'm a bit cynical, but I have seen such raw, authentic experiences. I've been in the highlands of Myanmar in Nagaland, and I've come across tribes there who have never seen a European. It's extraordinary. There's this sort of weird situation where the highlands of Nagaland are opened up by sort of these cheap Chinese sort of motorbikes, and these guys who look like they're dressed up like sort of Elvis or the Fonz from Happy Days, and they're like the traders. They're driving up these foothills on these little motorbikes, and they're delivering goods, and so there's a connection with the outside world, but they've never seen a European. And you
But
go
they
there.
know Elvis.
So the guys on the bikes do, because the guys are going from the population center, the sort of the local hub, and then they're driving for days and days and days up and down over these razorback mountains, several days, where they don't have any cell phone reception, and they don't have that point of reference. The people who live in those villages, they see the Elvis guy, and he'll bring in cheap manufactured clothes, and he'll walk into this village, and the kids are wearing a Scooby-Doo top, but they don't know what Scooby-Doo is. And then the old guys will come out, and they're wearing their ceremonial, stuff, and they've got monkey hair hats and tiger's teeth around their neck, because this guy used to be a tiger poacher in his youth, and even met a headhunter. These people used to be headhunters. They used to lop off their enemies' heads, and these two pasty-faced Europeans arrived, and this guy, he's wrinkled face, and he was wearing his stuff, and he was pretty much naked. He just looked at us. He goes, "I've heard of you guys," and through our interpreter, we asked if we could have a feast and put on this feast for them, and we got a pig, and they slaughtered the pig, and the entire village we invited to this long hut, and we all sat on the ground, and they gave us banana leaves, and then they just hand out these bits of pork and vegetables on the banana leaves, and then they started beating these big drums, and there's dancing and smoke.
Wow.
It's incredible. But
That's so
that
cool.
place, that existence is going to go.
No.
Well, there's a contract to put in, cell phone masts all across the country, and at some point a cell phone mast will go up there, which will...
I hope they will never get their hands.
It will better their lives, but then, it's a very difficult thing, and I'm not going to get into the philosophical debate of this, but are they comfortable in their own existence without the awareness of what the outside world is? Or suddenly they have that digital connection outside this world, and suddenly it's you need this, you need that, all this stuff that as the West we take.
They'll become just
granted.
like us.
Well, that's the thing, and the homogeny is their culture will go.
Yeah.
And then the kids start leaving for the big lights, because they want the fancy jobs, so they can buy the fancy cars and get the
Come to
iPhone
Hollywood.
and the PlayStation and all the other stuff they want. So it's a tricky one. It's very difficult. But it sort of slightly upsets me. You go to these remote countries now, and the airport starts looking like the same, and you go into the local shop, and it's the same products on the shelf. It's the same type of chocolate and crisps, and it's the same drinks, and it's
It is.
It is,
in that place you're saying.
Not there
you go
yet.
and you see a Kit Kat.
Not there yet, but they don't have shops. They live off the land, and you're staying in a hut, and it's literally it's a hut made of straw and sticks, and the pigs and the chickens live underneath the floor, and you all sleep on the floor, and there's no electricity. It's all done by candlelight, and it's
That sounds
real
great
authentic.
and horrible at the same time, because it sounds so amazing, because it would be such a dream to like be so outside of what you're so used to, you know?
Mm.
Like anywhere I go, like last week we went we had a trip for work to Moab, Utah. And you know, we had like we were like having a dinner and like party in a cave, and it was just like we had no service, or like we were like on top of a mountain, whatever. We had no service, and I enjoyed it so much just to like leave my phone in my bag in the car and not on me, because like my phone would always be on me, right? Because I'm like, what if I like what, you know, whatever. But I enjoyed that so much, the fact that I had no service. I was like, oh, this is my time to just look around, and nobody has their phone, so it's like we're forced to talk to each other and like get to know each other, and I enjoyed it so much. So that aspect of it, I'm like, I would love to do something like that, like sit around fire with like really people that are so different than me, and like learn from them and watch them and like see what they value and what they like. But I bet they had a lot of bugs. I bet there's like, you sleep on the ground and you're like, is that a snake?
No, well, there are bugs, but again, you know, the village, they have a little fire burning in the hut, and that clears out all the bugs, and you know, the ground around the village is sort of more sort of like hard packed earth, so you know, and any snake nearby,
They figured it out.
Yeah, so there's no danger on that front. But no, you're so right that there's such a liberating feeling of not having a phone. We're so beholden to these things. They're wedded to our hand. We're constantly, you know, and they're designed psychologically, you know, the red flashing lights to, you need to get your little endorphin rush and everything else. You know, I took a group, this was a birthday trip in, I think, 2011 to Namibia. And it was an international gang. It was for a lady's 30th birthday. Like 10 days in Namibia, we like had 7 planes flying across the desert from camp to lodge, and we were hanging out in the desert and had a sort of party amongst the dunes and tracking lions and, you know, seeing game and hanging out with sort of.
It's like a great way to turn 30.
It was great, but the first night when we arrived in the bush, you know, this was the day of the blackberry, the age of the blackberry. There was this sort of tension and panic because everyone was like tapping their phones, like, I got no reception, I got no nothing.
Right.
And
I'm
by night
from the
2,
world.
night 3, there was a toast every night of the trip to no blackberries.
Yes.
Because they, you know, they're engaged. They weren't looking through their screen. They weren't like worrying what was happening back home. When I go back to my Antarctic trip, we were on the ice for, you know, 49 days actually traveling, and another 3 days before we were picked up from where, you know, Lenin's statue was. The only bit of news that came through in that entire trip, this is in 2006-07, was that they had hung Saddam Hussein. And the rest of the world, you know, every day there's this news cycle and news feed, and okay, now it's Biden and Trump and whatever it might be. Back then it would have been, I can't remember, Clinton or Bush or whoever it was, and it doesn't matter. You know, we were away for 2 months. We came back. We had one bit of news that came through, and the world was not different. You know, and I know in some parts of the world things are changing, and you know, there's tragedy and stuff, but actually this news cycle stuff, you know, this need to know everything is actually not so important. There's certainly a liberation to that, and it's harder and harder now as cell phone coverage comes up, and you know, we've got Elon Musk who's putting a star thing out there. You know, everyone's going to have one of these bloody phones, and you know, these phones aren't for our benefit; they're to sell us stuff. And so we're all, you know, more dialed into the system, buy stuff that you don't need. You know, spend your money on crap, basically. You know, and so what I try and do is like, you know, life is about experience. You know, come and see the world, see this precious, amazing planet that we have, see the different cultures out there, and you know, that's what the real rewards are. You know, if you're immensely wealthy and you've got houses all over the world and car collections and jewelry and handbags and boats and whatever, when does that become enough? You know, what's another bag beyond the next? It just doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
It's the time that you spend with the people you love, with your friends, in extraordinary places.
Experiences. Like just seeing something like super cool, or like experiencing something really cool. I think one of the worst things you can do is reading the news when you wake up. I used to be a political science major, so I had to listen to the news and read the news just for like school, because we had to like be in the loop and like know what's going on. Changed my major from political science to psychology. Fully stopped like listening to news or reading, and I was so happy. And then I started like investing, right? So then I had to like read the news again to like see what's up, what's going on, like what to buy, and I'm sad now again.
It's bad. And I go through phases of, reading the news, and then it becomes a little bit of a obsession, and some of the stuff that's happening in the US
Like,
the
I
last
don't
few
want to know
years.
this.
But actually, it doesn't. I haven't looked at the news now
Good for you.
I've been traveling a lot the last
for
few
you.
weeks.
You're living the life,
I haven't
Henry.
seen the news in the last 5 weeks, and you know what? It doesn't matter. I mean, the whole COVID Corona thing.
It's always sad. It's always
sad,
bad.
and it's designed to get our attention, and it needs to be sensationalized. But then people are now getting numb to that. It's like, what's sensation? Like, look, death count X, this much explosion, this much drought, this extreme temperature. It's like, how much more can we take? It just, we become deadened to it.
Yeah, just like super desensitized.
If there's something really important, you're going to know about it.
Yeah, true. But what was I gonna ask you? Man, I like held it in my head for like a few minutes, and now I forgot about it.
Talking about remote tribes.
Yeah, no, it was something.
Phones or
Yeah, technology. What inspired that? How did your family take it? 'Cause like, isn't it kind of wild to tell your family like, I'm just gonna explore the world, and hopefully I'll find a way to make money out of it. Just support me. It'll either work or not.
Yeah, so there was no one particular instant. It was like a sort of an evolution. As I mentioned, there was some stuff going on at home which wasn't particularly great, and I was actually sort of escaping in a way.
Yeah.
That's how I became to do my Arctic trip in the Antarctic. It was it was a bit of an extreme way of getting away from stuff, but it was effective. And the Antarctic trip in particular was very life changing. That was 2 years of planning and this focal point of Lenin. And there was this amazing, 2 months of crossing the Antarctic, this simplicity of living. You travel, you eat, you sleep, and you repeat. And you're with 3 other people that you're immensely close to, and you're sharing this totally unique experience.
Yeah.
You're crossing parts of the planet that no human has ever
done.
laid eyes on.
Yeah.
And my focal point for these 2 years of organizing this trip had been the statue of Lenin.
Yeah.
And so when we finally got to Lenin, for a brief moment, the elation, the joy, the sense of companionship, was just incredible. But then after that moment passed, there was this anticlimax.
Yeah. Now what?
There I was, I was broke. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have a job prospect. I'd slightly been running away from crap at home. And my 2, teammates, Rupert and Roy, they're going back to wives and jobs. And
how old were you at the time?
I was 28.
Oh.
I was 28. Were they 28 then?
They were married already?
They were married already, yeah. Well, Rupert had just got married 3 weeks before the trip.
And his wife let him go do that?
Well, by the time we finished the trip, he'd spent more nights together with me than he had with his wife as a husband and wife. So
that's funny.
Yeah, but and that was like, okay, what happens now? And I went back to the UK, and it sort of dawned on me: if I can't beat me, join me. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to travel the world, but I want simplicity. I don't want complexity. Don't want to deal with difficult humans. I just want nice, cool people, and I'm going to take them to extraordinary places.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to go to Alaska. I spent 3 months doing a lot of the stuff that I should have learned beforehand. We were whitewater rafting, we were mountaineering, we were sea kayaking, we were hiking, we were doing survival skills, all that sort of stuff. And the plan generally was just, I was going to just take people, me, the humble guide. The other option could have been the professional adventurer. But again, I'm not driven by ego. I didn't want to have to constantly reinvent and come up with records and all that stuff. The world record was a sort of a bonus, but that's not what drives me. And so the humble guide was the way forwards, and I wanted to take people up mountains and across ice caps and it's sort of the more extreme adventures.
Right.
But then as I sort of got into that, and you were taking these people to these marvelous places, then they would start going, so where's next? And I had my time in East Africa on my horse riding safari, and I'd spent time in Greece and been down to Argentina. And so it's like, okay, we're going to go and do this.
Did you do those things still with those buddies that you did?
No, so then it became a commercial thing, and then people started paying, and then I did a recce trip to northern Ethiopia.
Reiki,
like a research trip, a recce trip. And we went to this amazing place called the Danakil Depression, which is like it's used to be a sea. It's now just a big salt pan, and they're still mining the salt there in the same methods they have for the last half a millennia. They have these big camel trains, and they're mining the salt, and it's like out of a movie.
Wow.
And then just near this area, the Danakil, there's a volcanic lava lake called Erta Ale, which is the world's longest continually active lava lake. And so it just
I saw
expanded.
videos of that. I could not believe that was a drone shot.
Yeah, we took a drone
I
shot.
couldn't believe that's real. I I was watching it. I was like, is this photoshopped?
It seems
Is
like
this
it.
real?
And like camping
And
on
you guys were like right there.
right
You guys
above the
are not
volcano.
that far from it.
No.
It was just like erupting everywhere, like insane. I was like, what?
I mean, to look into a volcano, I mean, I describe it, it's like looking into the soul of the earth. I mean, it's just transfixing.
Right.
And so, because I'd done interesting things, because I'm curious, because I'm good at researching stuff, I then started, and all through my life, I'd remembered and filed away in my head these little anecdotes and stories about cool things around the world. And then suddenly, like, these things would come back to the surface, like, okay, we need to do this, do this, do this.
Yeah.
And so the bucket list just grew. And because, you know, you've crossed the Antarctic, you've got a Guinness World Record, you know, that opens some doors. You can ring up anyone in the world and say, hey, look, I've heard you're a cool person. You know, you're the world's experts on, you know, massive butterfly congregations, you know, in the Himalayas or the Mexican jungles. You know, let's do some stuff together. And so just that's where it just started. The momentum started. And from what was going to be a very simple existence, me as a guide just taking people up and down mountains and going to cold places,
came this.
suddenly the production came in, and we were doing these, like, you know, almost events in weird and wonderful parts of the planet.
Obviously, you're doing it the right way. Silly question. When you were doing your world record trip with your buddies, did you guys have enough food that you never had to worry about food? Or did you guys ever had this moment where you sat next to each other and you were like, if we all are extremely hungry, who's going to eat who first?
Well, they would have definitely eaten me first, because I was definitely the fattest. Yeah.
Wait, you were that guy? You were the guy who was going to go first?
I was the fat one, yeah. But no, we talked about it. I reckon my sort of my right butt cheek, you know, that could have lasted a few days. It would have bought some
like grab
time.
a fork?
Yeah, just, you know, you get your
Dig
leather
in.
man, and you just cut a bit off, and, you know.
I mean, it is pretty tender.
Yeah.
Butt cheeks are tender.
And it's fatty as well, so there's a lot of energy. Oh, that's funny. No, we packed a lot of food, and part of the preparation is when you're in somewhere at the Antarctic, there's a handful of things that go wrong, but if you've prepared and you're sensible, not much can go wrong.
Yeah.
But what you need to manage is the fact that if you can't travel, if you need to be evacuated, it might be some time. So where we were going, we were out of range of aircraft pickup. So had we sort of called in the cavalry and said we need pickup, it could have been a week, 10 days with weather conditions before they could come and rescue us. So we'd always had a very robust buffer of food and fuel. So, you know, the trip was you know, planned to be 52 days. And we had 14 days of limited rations that could have kept us going.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
How many days did it take?
So we did it in 49 days. And then we had 3 days at Lenin, you know.
In cold weather like that for that long?
Yeah, average temperature is like minus 40.
What kept you guys going? Like, how did you not come to this, what the fuck am I doing moment? Of like, I just want to go back home to my fireplace and my blanket and my couch and my Netflix. Like, how did you, like, for so many days, how did you not, like, what kept you guys going for so long?
I don't know. I mean, we all had different moments and different opinions of how we dealt with it. For me, I could not have been happier. I mean, there was
loved it.
There was not a moment that I ever wanted to get out of there.
Really?
It was bliss. And that, I think that might have even annoyed my teammates a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I was very good at kiting. I led from the front. I took more weight than everyone. I just seemed to have this sort of bottomless energy. And
you were that guy that everyone was suffering. Everyone was like, I'm hungry and tired and I'm cold. And you were like, no, this is great. I love this.
And I would be furious. You know, I mean, if they were like slowing us down or we're making great progress and they wanted to like stop for the day, I would like be internally be going mad. I mean, there was a time when I think I very vividly imagined like stabbing a knife into Rupert's head, because I was just like, we
not the sharp end of the knife, right?
Oh, the sharp. I was like, it was almost just, it was murderous, the thoughts, because we'd had a really bad run of bad wind, and we'd made really crap progress, and we were really behind. And then suddenly we had a great wind, and we were doing really well. And then, he was like, I'm done for the day. And I was going to get biblical on him. And I knew, I'm quite an emotional person. So we put up the tent, and instead of sitting in the tent and having this silence of me just like literally shooting daggers at him, I go outside into the minus 40 degrees temperatures, and I just dig holes. I'd dig these holes, and I'd make these crazy like bathroom setups. But that was my way of getting rid of my rage and, my tantrum. That was my tantrum. And then I come back into the tent, we'd laugh about it. That I was this moron idiot, who just...
It reminds me, I don't know if you've seen this like meme on like Instagram, but it's like this guy washing his car as it's like pouring rain.
Yeah.
And it says when you just like got in an argument with like your girlfriend or whatever, and you just need to like get out and just like do something super random.
Spot on.
Just like go out in the cold and start digging holes.
Yes, I just dug holes.
Calms you down, hey.
But there's just, as I said, there's this simplicity of existence.
Right.
And going back to the phone thing, you have time with your own head.
Yeah.
There you are traveling in this beautiful place, and there's this, you're just, the snow is hissing under your feet, and you've got the kite like just literally just moves in this like figure of eight, sort of in these endless skies behind you, and you can just think and ponder your life and your aspirations and what makes you and what drives you. Because we're too busy, we're too distracted, we don't take time, we don't pause to think about ourselves and about our loved ones properly. It's like, it's flashing lights and this and the next thing and running to the next meeting and which call I've got to do.
Yeah.
We don't give ourselves that break. It's a very unnatural state that we've, as humans have found ourselves in.
Yeah.
I've always spent, all my summers in Greece. My parents, they had a sort of small travel company, but very different, villa rentals and things like that. And you go through these little Greek villages, and there'll always be like the old guy sitting on a chair by the road, just looking into the distance. Yeah. And you think,
but it's always an old guy, though,
But you think, what's wrong with them? They're a bit simple in the head or something. And it's like, no, they guys have cracked it. They're meditating. They've been doing it forever. They don't feel the need to impress, entertain, do things. Whereas, we have to like pay someone to sort of, do a podcast.
Take me away.
Take me away and do the meditation and whatever, and make a big deal about it and have our yoga mat strapped to our back. Whereas these guys, they just sit on the side, on the chair, and they look into the distance.
What must it be like?
They've done their career, they've raised their family, and they're just content. Yeah. They don't need to do things, and we're a product of the system. I need to do things. I find it very hard to switch off. So apart from crossing the Antarctic, which is not something I can sort of just whip up in a moment's notice. Paddleboarding, that's my big thing. I go and I take my paddleboard. I live in London, and I'll go on the canals.
Isn't it cold in there?
Well, you just don't fall in. And it's dirty as hell.
Ew.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's my switch off. I got a little inflatable, I got 3 of them. I stick them back in my car. I drive to the canal, pump it up,
There's
and on
plastic
I go.
Floating around everywhere.
Yeah, and there's the odd dead rat, and, stuff like that.
You're like, hey, I'll just look the other way.
It's not something I'm going to start marketing as a Cookson adventure. But
like, I'm not in Hawaii, so just gotta make it work.
Yeah, you're in a city. I love being in LA. You've got so much nature around you. You've got canyons and the sea. But London's a big urban space.
Yeah.
And it's got its parks, but they're busy, and that for me that doesn't tick the box. But you go on a canal, and you're in the back parts of London that you'd never otherwise see, and you're on your own, and there's a wonderful isolation to it, and put on some headphones, listen to some music, a podcast, and
my podcast.
Well, now I know. Yes, got the look there. Talking about looking daggers.
Nobody else is.
Yeah.
I like somebody will catch my friends like have another podcast on their phone, and I'm like, that is betrayal. It's like if your friends like booked a trip with like another, travel agency, wouldn't you be upset?
Yeah,
like, what are you doing?
It depends. There are people who have different skill sets, and some travel agencies do things that we don't do.
Where's your loyalty?
they're researching and making sure that the competition are still way behind. That's what it is. Yeah, they're just, it's for your benefit.
Yeah, you're right. Joe Rogan is way behind me.
Who's Joe Rogan? Joe Schmogan? I mean, whatever.
No, love the guy. Cannot talk shit about Joe Rogan. Here's something I really want to know. What has been the biggest failure you've ever had? Especially, like, you can talk about, like, a failure in life, but especially in these trips. Like, what has been something that happened that you were like, was not prepared for that. This is a terrible mistake. Can't believe this is happening.
I'm such a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And, we deal at such a high level.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Like, you love the fact that I brought my wine glasses in a pillowcase.
You've got a job. If the podcasts don't work out, then you can come and help plan trips. You could be our wilderness sort of sommelier.
Well, that sounds fun.
But no, I mean, because we deal at such a high level and the budgets are robust, we can build in redundancy. So we war game stuff. We plan, we talk about how, if this doesn't work. And especially if you're going to remote places, which things you haven't quite done before, the plan never quite goes to how do you expect it. And that's part of the adventure. But you have a backup, and we do have a climate crisis at the moment, and that does affect things like migrations of whales and birds. So you pick a particular time where you want to go and see that, and it doesn't necessarily occur as planned and predicted. So you need to have a fallback. I mean, the biggest screw up I can think of in recent, we touch wood, we've never had a bad incident. No one's ever been badly hurt. We've had a sprained ankle and a few blisters.
But in your own trips, when it wasn't for work, when you were responsible for other people.
I ever had a bad incident?
No, just a big failure. It doesn't necessarily have to be an incident where maybe you I don't know. I can't even think of what would be a failure in your life.
I honestly, and I'm not trying to sort of portray me as some sort of never got anything wrong. I've sure as hell made a huge amount of mistakes in my life, but there's been nothing catastrophic.
Good.
It really hasn't.
I feel like in what you do, if you do make a failure like that, you might not come back from that.
Well, so going back to, some people, because the professional adventurers will ham up and exaggerate how dangerous these things really are.
Yeah.
People expect you, to get into a lot more trouble than you should. And even though the perception is I do extreme things, I'm actually a very cautious person. So, I do enough adventurous things on a regular basis. If I cut too many corners, at some point something's going to get me. So I don't do that.
Good.
And the perception of what I do may appear dangerous, but no, we've planned it. We're working with the best experts on the planet, and we do it in the right conditions. We don't. So to give you an example, Kilimanjaro. A lot of people have climbed it or aspire to climb it, and there's 4 or 5 routes that traditionally people go up, and they tend to get quite busy, and they all congregate on the same route up to the top. And so when you have the sort of the final slog up to the summit, there's quite a lot of people there, and it's sort of this pretty unremarkable scree face. And so when the altitude's kicking in, you're feeling like rubbish, you're feeling sick, you're tired, it's cold. It's not the most aesthetic fun thing to do. Yet up the back of Kilimanjaro there's a thing called the Western Breach, and that is a sort of mountaineer's route up there. And a lot of people will avoid that because they're like, oh my God, that's too dangerous. And several years back, there was a rock fall and a whole lot of climbers died. So by default, people now don't go up that route. I took a bunch of it girls up that route because when we go up, we go up first thing in the morning before the sun comes up and it hasn't loosened the ice, so there's less likely to be a rock fall. We don't go up the chute where the rock fall goes. We don't go up when there's been a storm the night before, which might have loosened the rock. So you deplete and remove all the probabilities of causing problems.
Yeah.
There's always a risk in anything, but it's about managing that risk. And we took these, these girls are used to, walking up and down the King's Road in Chelsea and London.
Are they influencers?
Yeah. I mean, this is what 2000 and I'm trying to think 10, 11. So Instagram wasn't around. So back then, we didn't have the didn't
or it was very new.
It was very new. It was very new. Yeah, there was Facebook. I think there was a bit of Facebook going on, but it wasn't. It didn't have the same sort of reach. as things now. But again, it's perception. People that's dangerous. People have died on it. Yes, but the people who died sadly went up in midday when the sun was up and melted the ice. They walked up the chute where the rocks would go down. So there was a category of mistakes. Whereas we do the research, and then perception and reality is very, very different.
Oh man, it's just making me a little nervous. But here, look, Henry. I'm not telling you what to do with your career, but this is what I would do if I had. Is it a travel agency? Would you call it?
We're an experience provider.
An experience provider. If I was an experience provider, this would be two of the things I would for sure do. A, as soon as you walk in, we're confiscating your phones. Sorry. We have a photographer, we have a videographer. They will make sure to capture your special moments for you, and they're candid. It's better than your selfie with your puppy filter on. Nobody wants to see that. So we're taking your phones away so that you can be in the moment at all times. Like, it's not even an option to take your phone. Like, just forget about it. Like, tell your loved ones you're gone for however many days it is. You're gone. You'll be okay. You can have your location on or whatever. I don't know. We can work out the details. But the phones are going away. And the second thing is, like, you give people clear plans of, like, exactly what we're doing, right? Like, today we're doing this, we're climbing, we're walking, we're eating, we're, like, putting up the tents, this and that, so people know exactly what the plan is. And then without them knowing, you fake, oh, this wasn't supposed to happen, right? Because that just, like, it gives it that, like, ooh, this wasn't supposed to happen, but we survived it and we figured it out, you know what I mean? But it's like, it still is planned, and you know how to, like, you know, keep people safe and, like, out of danger and, like, out of harm. But it gives people that feeling of, like, oh, we did this crazy thing, and, like, actually crazy things happen, and, like, we actually, like, our life was in danger. Like, they think that, but, like, no, it was planned, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it would, like, add that much, because if I'm doing something like that, I want something crazy to happen. If everything goes exactly as planned, I mean, that sounds great, but, like, I want something crazy to happen. Like, I want, like, actor lions to attack us, and then somehow we get away. So you go figure.
You don't need actor lions. So I agree with you 100% on the phone thing, and we have suggested it. We've tried it. We've even looked at bringing in, you know, you have signal blockers, so you could have that perception of no signal. But these people, everyone is just transplanted. It's like a transplant in their body. It's and again, there are certain
with the phone thing.
With the phone thing, it's hard.
It's a bummer.
And, you know, when we've had, you know, things not go totally according to plan and a bit of drama, people do love that stuff. And you can, you know, we've done a couple of things where we had a birthday trip through Vietnam. It was a guy's 40th, and I think he brought something like 14 of his best mates along. And, you know, with him, we suggested this to him, said, look, what we can do, we can stage a kidnapping.
Yeah.
So and these guys, so, you know, we're in Vietnam.
What did he say?
He was like, this is brilliant. Let's do it. Yes. And so, you know, we set the scene. When they stayed in the hotels, we basically got the local paper and we doctored it. And so you put the psychological sort of markers in there, you know, a bit like in Inception, you know, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. So there was the article, you know, tourists captured by Khmer Rouge rebels in Cambodia. So, you know, and then like the breakfast, like, guys, like, we were planning to go to this part of Cambodia, but there's been a bit of trouble with the rebels there, so we're going to go somewhere else. We just want to make sure your safety is paramount. And there we were, and we had a mixture of actors and actual real-life ex-Khmer Rouge rebels, and we'd done several rehearsals, and basically in the morning, you know, there was a firefight, like, you know, guns going off, a few, like, grenades and explosions. But what we had to be really careful is all these guys they were Israeli, so they're all, you know, IDF, Israeli Defense Force.
To, like, so actually take him.
We were worrying that, you know, that they would, like, the training would kick in. Okay, they're all in their 40s, so they were in the military a long time ago. They're going to start breaking people's necks. So we had to like have an extra plan to stop the guests killing the actors.
I understand what you meant by the inception now, because it's like, it could, like, you think you're fooling them, and they could be fooling you. They're like, oh.
And, you know, the illusion, I think, kept up for about 3, 4, 5 minutes, which is a long time when there's, you know, firefights.
3, 4 minutes?
Yeah. They were like, what's in there? There's some poor guy, you know, using we were in a camp, and, you know, he was using the restroom, and he was like caught horribly short. He was like and then they realized what was happening, but then they played along. And then, you know, we had the helicopter evac, and he was like being held hostage in a cave with the things, and then it became a lot of fun.
And then he came back.
Then he came back, yeah.
He should have came back with like doves just flying off. Like,
well, no, we kept the little finger, you know.
That is like so fucked up and amazing at the same time.
And then you know, when I this is when I was 18, when I left school, and I was working on the safaris down in Kenya, you know, beautiful luxury camps, and it was a horse riding safari. You know, it was normally a 2-week experience, and then by the end of it, you could gauge who were the really capable riders, and who had a little bit of sense of adventure. And then there was this one pride of lions that was called the Musiara Pride. These lionesses, and they love to chase the horses. You know, they see the horses, they would just, sure as hell, they'd go after them. And so the night before we go, right, tomorrow we're going to go to this place, and we are going to get chased by lions.
Oh, great. Let's do it.
Who's in? And
I'll wear sneakers.
And you know, people will be thinking, my God, that's really, really dangerous. Yeah, I mean, this was back in 1995.
Yes, let's go.
And, you know, we used to do this thing. And the thing is, if a lion chases you, if you're very close to the lion and it starts chasing you, the initial burst of speed from a lion is faster than the horse. So don't run. You know, the whole cat and mouse with a lion, they will go for you.
What are you supposed to do? Stare it down?
So you've got to stare it down. So the rules are, you know, we know where the pride is, so we don't get so close that if they suddenly charge us, we're going to get into trouble. But they will start loping afterwards, and then we start galloping away, and, you know, there's a safe distance. But if we get surprised by a lion and they're too close, then you've got to stand your ground, you've got to face them down, you actually got to walk towards the lions, and you've got to shout and
it's
scream.
The same as like mountain lions and coyotes, right? This is what I've heard. You stare them down, make yourself as big as you can, maybe even make some loud noises, and then don't back up. Definitely don't run.
No, you don't run.
So
you
make yourself as threatening.
You can back up slowly when you see that the lion has come down. And then there's all sorts of tells, like they're flicking their tail, and then if they've got cubs, then you've got an extra level of issue and stuff like that.
That's a different story.
I think one of the most dangerous points in my life was, again, on that particular, you know, those 6 months working on that safari, walking, you know, we were doing a walk through the bush, and I just had a local Maasai spear as protection, and came around the corner, and there's a lioness with some cubs, and this thing was crouched down low, it was growling, and its tail was flicking, and that's sort of like, this thing's about to charge.
Lion.
That was a moment. Anyway, we stood our ground. We backed off very, very slowly. Unfortunately, the lion backed off as well. And so,
fortunately, so we can have this conversation now.
Yeah.
I'm very happy about
that. Again, that was back me working for some other people when I was, you know, out of school. I was fresh. So you know, now we're a little bit more. We have a few more precautions in place.
You know a little better.
Yeah.
As a last question, because I know we're running out of time for sure, right? We're over. Right before we wrap up, what's the best advice you've ever gotten in your life?
The best advice I ever got was, this is easy. I mean, it's not. It was very particular to me, but there I was working at Goldman Sachs, and this itch that was Africa that I'd so enamored about from my time working on the riding safari. I was away for a weekend with my dad. You know, we'd drunk a lot of nice wine. I think we was drinking some port. And I was chatting to this guy who actually ran a safari outfit. And I was like, and we'd do this every year, this weekend. And this was like the third year of me moaning about my bloody job at Goldman Sachs. And I didn't like it. And it was miserable. And London was so-and-so. And I was like, and he just turned around and said, why don't you just quit? Yeah. And that moment, it was like a weight being lifted off my shoulders.
Because you were like, oh, that's an option.
It was the clearest thing to ever do. And that bit of advice, that transformed my life.
Why don't you quit? Yeah. Sometimes knowing when to quit.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, we're always told, like, don't be a quitter. Like, always go after it. Always fight for it. Always chase it. was like, no, sometimes knowing when to quit is a win.
Yeah, and these banks, these companies, they spend time, they invest in their staff. They don't want you to leave, so they just dangle that little carrot. There's a bigger bonus. There's thing, you're going to give you more leave. You know, you're going to get a better job title. It's BS. Your life is short. You know,
go explore Antarctica.
Go explore. Yeah. You don't have to do Antarctica. You go to Iceland. You know, there's little, you know, there's upgrades. You know, and again, we have, you know, a lot of our clients are referred. You know, they're well traveled. They've seen the world, and they get put in touch with us. And some of them are less intrepid than others, and so you know, we start gently. You know, if people want to go to Africa, you know, I said go to Namibia first. That's a really safe. I mean, Africa is very safe anyway. But Namibia in particular, there's very few people there. You're very remote. And it's just beautiful, and that's just a starter, and then you gain their confidence there. It's okay, right now we're going to go somewhere a little bit more funky and a bit more interesting. Cool. So you know, everything is, you know, personalized to them, and you know, you've got to be so.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I love all the stories you told, and it's just like it makes me want to like literally go home and pack a bag and just like head straight to.
Well, as I said,
we
need the sommelier on our trip, so yeah, you're hired.
Just take my phone away from me, please.
We will.
I hate that thing.
I can't bear them. I really cannot bear them. I mean, I've just been on a boat for 10 days in the middle of the Pacific on this island called Cookson Island.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
It's the opening scene of Jurassic Park.
Beautiful.
And diving with sharks and researching sharks and no reception for 10 days.
Beautiful.
Just amazing.
What a life you live. Where can people find you, and what's your website? Why don't you say that?
So the company's called Cookson Adventures, and we're on Instagram. We have a website, and my name's Henry Cookson, and you know, I have my Instagram as well, and that gives a really good idea of where we go and how we do things. And it's not all the extreme hardcore stuff. That's the more fun stuff to talk about. Yeah. But you know, we're taking families, we do honeymoons, we do round the world sabbaticals. You know, we do groups of friends, we do bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, and you know, if it's interesting, exciting, if it's different, then we're the people to come to.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I mean, like, I've dug in and I've like checked out everything you guys do, and like, it seems like if you can afford it, this is the way to do it. 100%.
100% agree. We'll hopefully get you on a trip somewhere someday. I do my research trips. You know, I always need a bag carrier, and you know, someone to help with my cameras and stuff. So and just like carrying all the bags. Yeah.
Can people finance it, or is it just like no, like straight up?
We've never done that model before. Again, we're open to different things. But
I was just wondering.
Financing, the problem is once you've done the trip, that the money's out the door, and there's a bit of a risk. I think my financial control would probably like look at me in horror.
Okay, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, we'll talk. We'll work something out.
All right. Well, it was very nice talking to you. Thank you so much for coming by.
Pani, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
All right,
and
everybody.
The wine's been great.
Yeah? Good.
Wine company and good stories. What more can you want?
Oh, exactly.
And the phone's on silent and flight mode. So, you know, we've had that little bubble of, you know, the outside world doesn't exist. So.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.
Wonderful.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. You've been working, but you're flirting with the weekend. You can freak out. 1 in a million. You're a gem, shine when the light